Hi everyone, welcome to Easneye Mansion. It's amazing that it's 62 years ago that I first came to this building and walked through these very doors. Welcome to the magnificent story of Easneye. I like to divide the story of Easneye into three parts. Firstly, there's the place itself, that's Easneye. Then there's the people, the Buxton family. And then finally, there's the prayer, which has had great ramifications in the lives of people who lived here. Let's look at the place, Easneye. Easneye is the ridge of hills which is bounded by the rivers Ash and Lee and Stort. And people have lived here a long, long time. There is, in fact, what we call a burrow, where people were buried in Stone Age times. And that burrow's been investigated by the Hertford Museum. Nothing spectacular was found, but it shows that we're not the first people to inhabited this place. So Easneye means water island, and that's because way back, ancient Britons used to pasture their cattle, their flocks down in the valley towards the Lee. But every winter the flooding meant they had to flee the Lee and come up on this hill. And so it literally was an island which preserved them during the winter months. Easneye, water island. So it goes back a long time. History breaks into the story of Easneye when in 1066, William the Conqueror invaded and captured these British islands. He set up his half-brother, Bishop Odo, with land and property in this area stemming from Waltham Abbey way up to beyond Easneye. And this land was occupied by the abbots of Waltham Abbey up until the time when our King Henry VIII took over all of the monasteries, its wealth, its land, and gave it to his favourites. And in particular, this land of Easneye was given to his second wife, Anne Boleyn. Sadly, Anne didn't live very long to appreciate this land. She lost her head, along with various other wives. And the property passed into the hands of a man called Edward Bache. Edward Bache held a prominent post in the navy of King Henry VIII. He supplied the victuals, that's to say the groceries, which the sailors used and ate. So he was a wealthy man, and he built property on the nearby ridge, and that became known as Stansted Bury. And Edward Bache was, like many of his contemporaries, a pious man. And in his church that he built, St. James, there's a lovely figurine of him and his wife kneeling in prayer. Not only was he a pious man, he was a generous man to the neighborhood and provided almshouses and a school and various other facilities for the people in this area. Eventually, the land passed from the Bache family to various owners until we come to the 1860s. And that's when we welcome the Buxtons into our story. Thomas Henry Fowle Buxton was a wealthy brewer. He owned the largest brewery in Europe, according to Wikipedia. He was a wealthy man. He wanted to move out of the North London house that he lived in. His wife had provided him with 7 children. He needed a nice big home for the family comfort and also to show his status in the neighborhood. And so Mr. Buxton commissioned a well-known go-to architect of the 1860s, a man called Alfred Waterhouse. Now, he was literally the go-to architect. He designed and had built the Natural History Museum, the Manchester Free Trade Hall, 5 Oxbridge colleges. He was a very successful architect. His style was the sort of terracotta mock Gothic, and you can see his figurations in all of those places I mentioned and many more. And in 1867, Mr. Buxton commissioned Alfred Waterhouse to begin building. And by 1868, the house was ready for the occupation by the Buxton family. The Buxton family were a remarkable Christian family. Like so many Quakers of that era, Joseph Fry, Cadburys, and other Christians, they not only wanted to be a blessing to the neighborhood in which they were set, but they wanted to bless the whole world. Sir Thomas Fowell Buxton, the father of the man who built this place, became famous through his support of William Wilberforce in the abolition of slavery. Wilberforce actually died before the completion of the anti-slavery movement, and it was left to Sir Thomas Fowell Buxton to see it through Parliament in 1832. Slavery was abolished throughout the British Empire. And as an acknowledgement of his role in reducing slavery, he was called the Liberator. And he was given a motif, which we can see here on the fireplace, a deer or hart for Hertfordshire, and around his neck is a little shield. On that shield, there is a Negro boy's head, the Liberator, the man who had done so much to change the whole attitude of British people towards slavery. And so when Sir Thomas Fowell Buxton's son moved into this house in 1868, had this remarkable fireplace designed by Alfred Waterhouse. On the fireplace was this shield, and either side of the fireplace was the biblical motto from Ecclesiastes 6, "Whatever your hands find to do, do it with your might." And that was the motto or motif of the Buxton family. They did everything for the glory of God and for the well-being of people. And so, having bought this land, having commissioned the architect Alfred Waterhouse, the family moved in 1868. Just prior to their moving in, Hannah Buxton, the wife of Sir Thomas Fowell Buxton, wrote to her grandson expressing her desire for a dedicatory prayer. And this prayer was almost prophetic in its fulfillment. She prayed that it might ever be an habitation of Christian folk and that they might be a fountain of blessing to the world. And that's proved to be true when all nations moved in to this building in 1964. Since then, it has indeed been a fountain of blessing to the world. This is the main staircase leading from the hall up to where the Buxtons live on the first floor and where their servants and household helps would live on the top floor. Down there in the Great Hall is where Thomas Fowell Buxton would gather together the household members of staff and the family, and there he would pray each morning for them all and for the needs in the village before catching his train down to London, where he was the managing director of what was then the largest brewery in Europe. And so he was an influential man, and he was quite a wealthy man, but he used his wealth to extend God's kingdom. This is the room where in the evening the family would withdraw. It was their withdrawing room. They would eat in the oak room and then move in here. And there's some pictures which illustrate that in this room. Now, the whole family was always interested in worldwide mission. It welcomed many missionary leaders to its house to stay. Notably amongst them was Samuel Crowther, the first black African bishop. Also was a man called Charlie Studd. Studd had played cricket, first of all for Cambridge and then for England. And he had caught the whole press by surprise by announcing he was giving up his sporting career and his wealth and was going to China as a missionary. And one of the Buxtons, Alfred, decided to go with him, having married one of Charlie Studd's 4 daughters. And so the whole family, as I said, was engaged in mission. Barclay Buxton went to Japan and took some of the household servants with him. And they, in the democracy of God, learnt the Japanese language quicker than he did. And so they were greatly used as a whole unit in establishing the Japan Evangelistic Band. And so mission at home and overseas was very much a key feature of the Buxton family life. Barclay Buxton had 4 sons. One of them died in the First World War. 2 of them were very badly injured. Alfred, who went with C.T. Studd, eventually moved from Congo to Ethiopia. One of the very badly injured members of the family was Captain Godfrey Buxton. Now, Godfrey Buxton, that is, was injured 4 times in 24 hours in the First World War. He was in a shell hole and he said to God, "God, what can you do with this broken bag of bones?" It took him 8 months of hospitalization before he could begin to walk again. And he said to his brother in despair, "How can God use me?" And his brother said to him, "Well, train the chaps, Godfrey." So many of the men came out of the First World War, their eyes having been opened to overseas travel and the need for mission. And so Godfrey Buxton set up the missionary training colony in South London and trained many, many men to go overseas. And Godfrey Buxton was principal of that college. Before the family moved in to Easneye, Hannah Buxton had written to her grandson, John Henry Buxton, and suggested a dedicatory prayer for the new home. And in it, she expressed that however long or however short a time the family lived in the house, that it might always be a habitation of Christian people and a fountain of blessing to the world. And that's certainly what it did become. And there we take up the story of the prayer and the fulfillment and the answer to that prayer as the years went by. It was in 1963 that the then principal of All Nations Christian College, or Missionary College as it was known, a charismatic man called David Morris, who'd been a major in the Second World War, he was principal of All Nations College at Taplow near Maidenhead. Now the place was falling apart. It was not a good place to be in. I remember there being great leaks and buckets everywhere to capture the rainwater. And so David Morris persuaded the council that the college should move. And Godfrey Buxton pulled out of his bag a photograph, an old brown photograph of his family home at Easneye. and wondered whether the college would like to consider moving from Taplow to Easneye, and there set up a college in his old family home. Now that was very timely because the mansion at Easneye had been used during the war to house orphan children who had been left homeless and parentless during the Blitz over London. And for about 15 years, children were brought here and were housed. And there's still some ancient ladies in the village who remember nursing these children. But that all finished, and the building was empty, and it was ripe for a takeover by a missionary college. And so, as I said, the college moved here in 1964. Now at that time, it was just men who were being trained here. And David Morris believed that in the swinging 60s, that was an outmoded form of training. That men and women should train for God's service together. I remember there was a vote when David Morris suggested this to the all-male college about who would like to have training alongside women. All of the students, apart from two, voted against it. How strange. I was one of the two who voted in favour of it. And it came to pass when in 1971, 3 colleges came together: Mount Hermon Ladies College, Ridgelands Ladies College, and All Nations Missionary Training College, all male. And so the new college, All Nations Missionary College, was formed here with new buildings in 1971. And since then, and just before, it's reckoned that 11,000 men and women, families and singles have gone overseas to extend God's kingdom around the world. So truly an answer, a fulfillment of Hannah Buxton's prayer that this might ever be a fountain of blessing to the world. And so history takes us from Water Island with its inhabitation by Britons escaping the floods. We move on to the coming here of the Buxton family, and then finally the occupation by the 3 colleges, Mount Hermon, Ridgelands, and All Nations Missionary College, to make it a remarkable building which has sent missionaries to extend God's kingdom all over the world. My name is Bob Hunt. This has been a big part of my life for 62 years. And so we leave you with the story of Easneye.